The cold rain hit the thick glass of the 50th floor Manhattan office. Talani stood by the window, letting the gray light wash over her dark skin. She pulled her black blazer tight across her chest. Today was the day. Her law firm trusted her to close a $2 billion tech buyout. If she won this, she made partner. If she lost, her career was dead. She had not slept in 3 days. Her stomach felt like a tight knot, but she kept her face completely blank. She had learned the hard way that showing weakness only got you hurt. 3 years ago, she was a broke girl cleaning hotel rooms on a sunny island in Hawaii to pay for night school. She had a soft heart back then. She gave it to a man who lied, used her, and left her alone with a broken heart and a baby. Now, she was a shark. She did not trust men, and she sure as hell did not trust rich men. The heavy boardroom doors swung open. The room went dead silent. The opposing team walked in. Leading them was the man Wall Street called the Ice King. He ruined companies for fun. He fired thousands of people without blinking. No one dared to look him in the eye, much less touch him. Talani turned around to face her enemy. Her heart completely stopped. The air left her lungs. It was him, Gideon Rio. He wore a dark, $1,000 suit that fit his wide shoulders perfectly. His black hair was pushed back, and his dark Korean eyes were as cold and dead as they were the day he left her. He was not just some guy from the island. He was a billionaire heir, and he was standing right in front of her. Before Talani could even open her mouth to speak, a tiny voice yelled from the hallway, "Candy." Talani panicked. Her babysitter had canceled this morning, and she had to bring her 2-year-old son to work. Her assistant was supposed to keep him in the break room, but little Leo was fast. The toddler ran right past the men in suits, his light brown curls bouncing. He ran straight to the tallest, scariest man in the room. Little Leo grabbed onto Gideon's expensive suit leg and looked up. "Candy?" he asked, pointing a sticky finger at Gideon's pocket. The whole room gasped. One of Gideon's lawyers took a step back, looking terrified. Everyone knew Gideon hated kids and hated being touched. Gideon froze. He looked down at the little boy holding his leg. Then, slowly, he looked up. His cold eyes locked onto Talani's face across the long wooden table. He saw the pure fear in her eyes. Then he looked back down at the boy who shared his exact same eye shape. If you are loving this crazy standoff, please leave a like on this video right now. It really helps the algorithm push more wild stories like this to you. Also, let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. But seriously, if you don't hit that subscribe button for Afro-Korean Love FM right now, you might leave Talani to face this dangerous, powerful man all by herself, and he might take her baby away forever. Don't be the reason she loses everything she worked so hard for. Subscribe now and save them. The silence in the boardroom was so heavy it felt hard to breathe. The rain kept hitting the glass outside, making a soft, drumming sound. Gideon did not move to push the child away. He just stood there, staring down at the curly-haired boy holding onto his pants. "Leo," Talani said. Her voice shook for a second, but she cleared her throat and made it hard. She walked fast across the thick gray carpet. Her high heels clicked loudly. She reached Gideon, refusing to look him in the eye. She grabbed her son by his small waist and pulled him away from the billionaire. "I am so sorry," she said to the room, not just to him. "My assistant was supposed to keep him next door." "Mine," Leo whined, reaching his little hand back toward Gideon. Gideon slowly put his hand inside his suit jacket. His security guard stepped forward, but Gideon held up one finger to stop him. He pulled out a small, red peppermint wrapped in clear plastic. He held it out. His hand was large, his fingers long and pale. Talani felt a sudden, hot anger burn in her chest. "He doesn't eat hard candy. He could choke," she snapped, her voice much louder than she meant it to be. Gideon slowly pulled his hand back. He finally looked right at her. His face did not change, but his eyes were searching hers, reading every line of her face. "You look different, Talani," he said. His voice was deep, smooth, and low. It sent a terrible shiver down her spine. He remembered her name. "And you look exactly like the kind of man who would try to steal my client's company for half its worth," she fired back. She turned to the door just as her young assistant, Sarah, came running in, breathing hard and looking scared to death. "I am so sorry, Miss Talani. He just slipped right out of my hands," Sarah cried, reaching for the boy. "Just take him, Sarah. Lock the door to the break room if you have to, and get him some apple juice," Talani said. She handed Leo over. She waited until the door clicked shut before she turned back to the massive table. She walked over to her side, pulled out her chair, and sat down. She opened her laptop. Her hands were shaking, but she kept them flat on the keyboard so no one could see. Gideon watched her every move. He did not sit right away. His team of 5 men in gray suits looked confused. They were used to people bowing down to their boss. They were not used to a young black woman in a sharp blazer yelling at him and snatching kids away. Finally, Gideon pulled out his chair and sat directly across from her. "Let us cut the bullshit," Talani said. She looked around at his lawyers, then locked eyes with Gideon. "Your opening offer of $1.2 billion is a joke. It is an insult. My client has the best server technology in the country. You know it, I know it, and the market knows it. If you want this company, you are paying $2 billion, and you are keeping all the union workers on staff. If not, we walk right now." One of Gideon's lawyers, an older white man with a red face, slammed his hand on the table. "Listen here, little lady. You do not talk to Mr. Ryu like that. We hold all the cards. Your client is bleeding cash." "Shut the fuck up, Davis," Gideon said softly. The whole room went dead again. Davis turned pale and closed his mouth. Gideon leaned forward, resting his elbows on the dark wood. He did not look at his lawyer. He only looked at Talani. "You want $2 billion, Talani." "Miss Davis," she corrected him coldly. "Use my last name. We are not friends." A tiny muscle jumped in Gideon's jaw. It was the only sign that he felt anything at all. "Miss Davis," he repeated, tasting the words. "You want $2 billion. You want to save the jobs of 2,000 people you do not even know. That is very noble. But you are forgetting who you are dealing with. I do not pay full price. For anything." Talani laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. "I know exactly who I am dealing with. I am dealing with Ryu Enterprises, a company that just lost its main supply chain in Asia last month. A company whose stock dropped 4% last Tuesday because the board is worried about your leadership. You need this tech to save your new phone launch. You need us way more than we need you. So do not sit there and act like God. You are bleeding, Gideon, and I am a shark." Her own team stared at her in pure shock. No one talked to Gideon Ryu about his company's failures. People got ruined for less. Gideon stared at her for a long, heavy minute. Then, the craziest thing happened. The corners of his mouth turned up. He smiled. It was a dark, dangerous smile that made Talani's blood run cold. "You did not go to law school just to play nice, did you?" he asked quietly. "You learned how to bite." "I learned that people will step on your neck if you let them," she said, her voice dropping to a low whisper that only he could hear clearly. "I stopped letting people step on me 3 years ago." Gideon's eyes darkened at the mention of the past. He remembered the island. He remembered the smell of the ocean, the cheap hotel sheets, the way she used to laugh when he kissed her neck. He also remembered leaving her in the middle of the night without saying goodbye because his father forced him to come back to New York and marry a woman from another rich family. He was secretly engaged back then. He broke Talani to protect his family's money. "I want the room cleared," Gideon said suddenly. His lead lawyer gasped. "Sir, we cannot just—" "Get out," Gideon barked. His voice was suddenly loud and full of anger. "Every single one of you, get out of this damn room right now." Talani's team looked at her. She nodded slowly. "Give us 10 minutes," she told her people. Chairs scraped against the floor. Papers rustled. Within 30 seconds, the massive boardroom was completely empty except for the 2 of them. The heavy doors clicked shut, locking them inside. Gideon stood up slowly. He took off his suit jacket and threw it on his chair. He started walking around the table toward her. Talani did not move. She refused to push her chair back. She refused to run. She sat tall, keeping her face perfectly still. He stopped right next to her chair. He was so close she could smell his expensive cologne mixed with the faint smell of mint. It was the exact same smell from the island. It made her stomach twist with a sick mix of hate and memory. "Whose kid is that?" Gideon asked. His voice was rough now. The cold CEO mask was slipping. "Mine," Talani said, staring straight ahead at the empty chairs across the table. "I know he is yours," Gideon snapped. He slammed his hand down on the table right next to her laptop. Talani jumped a little but quickly forced herself to stay still. "I am asking who the father is." "That is none of your damn business," she said, finally looking up at him. "We are here to talk about a $2 billion deal. If you want to talk about my personal life, you can leave. Gideon leaned down. His face was only inches from hers. His dark eyes were burning with something wild and dangerous. He has my eyes, Talani. He has my exact eyes, and he is what, 2 years old? The math is not hard to do. You do not get to do math, she hissed, her anger finally breaking through. You do not get to come back from the dead, ruin my meeting, and act like you care. You left. You went back to your perfect, rich life and your secret fiancé. You think I didn't find out? You think I didn't see the damn engagement pictures in the magazines a month after you left me crying in that hotel room? Gideon flinched. The anger in his face cracked, revealing a deep, ugly guilt. Talani, you do not understand what was happening back then. My father. I don't give a shit about your father, she yelled, standing up so fast her chair hit the window behind her. She pushed hard on his chest, forcing him to take a step back. I don't give a shit about your family's dark legacy or your billion-dollar empire. I dug myself out of the dirt while I was throwing up from morning sickness. I went to class with no sleep. I built my reputation on my own. You are not going to ruin it. You are not going to touch my son. You are going to sign the deal for $2 billion, and then you are going to get the hell out of my life. Gideon caught her wrists. He didn't squeeze hard, but his grip was firm. He looked down at her hands, feeling the strength in them now. I broke off the engagement, he said quietly. Talani froze. She stared at him, her chest moving up and down as she breathed hard. What? I broke it off 2 years ago, the day I realized no amount of money or family power could make me forget you. He pulled her wrists slightly, stepping closer until their bodies were almost touching. I have been looking for you, Talani, but you changed your last name. You disappeared. I took my mother's name, she said, trying to pull her hands away, but he held on. Let go of me, Gideon. I won't, he whispered, his voice cracking. The ruthless CEO was completely gone. In front of her was just a desperate man. I burned down half my father's empire just to get away from his control. I took over this company to do things my way. I am not the same coward who left you on that island. I don't care, she lied. Her heart was beating so fast it hurt. You do care, he said, stepping even closer. I see it in your eyes. You hate me and you have every right to. But that boy in the hallway is my son, and you are the only woman I have ever loved. I am not walking away this time. I will give you the $2 billion. I will give you the whole damn company if you want it, but you are not shutting me out. Talani ripped her hands out of his strong grip. She took a fast step backward, her back hitting the cold glass of the tall window. The rain was beating against the outside of the building, making a loud, angry sound. She breathed in heavily, her chest rising and falling. She hated how close he was. She hated that his smell still made her feel safe, even after everything he had done. Do not ever talk to me about giving me things, Talani said. Her voice was shaking now, but she did not care. She pointed a finger right at his chest. You think you can just buy your way back into my life? You think $2 billion erases the nights I sat on the floor of a tiny, freezing apartment, crying because I did not have enough money to buy Leo his asthma medicine? Gideon closed his eyes. A sharp look of pain crossed his handsome face. He swallowed hard. Talani, please, I did not know. Of course you did not know, she yelled. She did not care if the men outside in the hallway heard her. Because you were gone, you were back in your massive mansion, sleeping in silk sheets, planning a wedding with a woman your daddy picked out for you. You left me with nothing. I had to drop out of regular classes. I had to clean toilets during the day and take night classes online. I threw up every morning in a dirty bucket while you were probably drinking expensive champagne. So do not stand there and tell me you will give me the world. I built my own damn world. Gideon opened his eyes. They were completely dark. He looked at her like she was the only thing breathing in the entire city. He slowly stepped away from her, giving her space. He understood that cornering an injured animal only made it bite harder, and Talani was not just an animal. She was a mother protecting her young. You are right, Gideon said quietly. His deep voice filled the empty space between them. I am a piece of shit. I was a coward. I let my father threaten me. He told me he would ruin your life, make sure you never got into law school, and have you thrown out on the street if I did not come back to Seoul and marry that woman. I left to protect you. Talani laughed bitterly. It was a cold, ugly sound. Oh, what a hero. You saved me by breaking my heart and leaving me pregnant. Save the fake stories for the magazines, Gideon. I am not that stupid little island girl anymore. It is the truth, he said, stepping closer to the long wooden table. And the moment my father died 2 years ago, I canceled the wedding. I took over the company. I started looking for you, but you erased yourself. I survived, she corrected him. She walked over to her laptop. She did not want to look at his face anymore. It hurt too much. And right now, the only thing I care about is my job. If I do not close this deal, my firm will fire me. They only gave me this chance because they thought I was ruthless enough to handle the Ice King. So, are you going to sign the deal for $2 billion, or are we going to walk out of here and let your company crash? Gideon stared at her. He loved the fire in her eyes. He loved how hard she had become, even if it meant she was hard against him. He walked over to her side of the table. He reached out and gently closed her laptop screen. Talani froze, her hands hovering over the keyboard. I will sign, he said. I will give you the $2 billion. I will save the jobs of those 2,000 workers. I will give you the biggest win your law firm has ever seen. You will make partner by tomorrow morning. Talani looked up at him. She did not trust this. Men like Gideon Ryu did not just give away billions of dollars without wanting something dirty in return. What is the catch? What do you want? I want dinner, he said softly. Tonight, just you and me, and I want to meet my son properly. No, Talani said instantly. She crossed her arms over her chest. Absolutely not. My son is off limits. You do not get to just walk in and be a father, and I am not going on a date with you. Gideon's jaw tightened. The dark, dangerous CEO was starting to show through the cracks of his guilt. He leaned down, placing both hands flat on the table, trapping her in his space. I am not asking for a date, Talani. I am asking for 1 hour of your time to explain everything. And as for Leo, he is my blood. You can hate me until the day you die, but you will not keep my son away from me. If you try, I will hire the best lawyers in the country. I will tie you up in family court for the next 10 years. You know I have the money to do it. Fear shot through Talani's heart. This was exactly what she had been afraid of. She knew how much power his family had. If he wanted to, he could drag her through hell and use a judge to take Leo away. She looked at his cold, serious eyes. He was not making a fake threat. He meant every single word. You are a monster, she whispered. I will be whatever I have to be to keep you from running away again, he replied without blinking. So, do we have a deal? $2 billion for your client, and you give me 1 hour tonight. Talani hated him. She hated him so much her teeth hurt from grinding them together, but she also knew how to play the game. She needed this win for her career. She needed the money to secure a safe future for Leo. If she had to sit through a dinner with the devil to get it, she would. Fine, she spat out. 1 hour, in public, at a place I choose. And Leo does not come. You are a stranger to him. I am not confusing my baby just because you suddenly feel guilty. Gideon stared at her for a long time. Finally, he nodded slowly. Deal, for now. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a heavy, expensive black pen. He reached across the table and grabbed the printed contract that her team had left behind. He did not even read the pages. He just flipped straight to the back. He pressed the pen to the paper and signed his name in quick, sharp strokes. He threw the pen on the table. It made a loud clacking sound in the quiet room. The company is yours, he said. Tell your bosses they can pop the champagne. Talani looked down at the signature. It was real. She had actually done it. She had backed the most terrifying man on Wall Street into a corner and won. But as she looked at the black ink, she realized she had just sold her peace of mind. He was back in her life. She turned away from him and walked fast to the heavy boardroom doors. She unlocked them and pulled them open. Her team and Gideon's lawyers almost fell into the room. They had clearly been standing right outside, trying to listen through the thick wood. The old white lawyer, Davis, looked red and angry. He rushed past Talani and went straight to Gideon. Sir, whatever she threatened you with, we can fight it. We have a team of. Shut the fuck up, Davis, Gideon said. His voice was completely flat and cold again. He did not look at the older man. He was busy putting his dark suit jacket back on, adjusting his cuffs. The deal is done. We are buying them for $2 billion. No changes to the staff. Draw up the final papers by 5 o'clock today. Davis opened his mouth in pure shock. His face turned pale. $2 billion, sir, that is suicide. The board will pull you out of the CEO chair. Your uncle will use this to vote you out." Gideon finally turned to look at Davis. His eyes were so dead and scary that Davis actually took a step backward. "Let my uncle try. It is my money. I will burn this whole company to the ground if I want to. If you ever question my orders in front of other people again, I will ruin your life. Do you understand me?" Davis swallowed hard and looked at the floor. "Yes, Mr. Ryu, I understand." Talani watched the exchange. She felt a cold shiver go down her back. This was the man the world saw. This was the monster who destroyed lives without caring. And this was the man who claimed he loved her. She did not wait around to see anything else. She quickly grabbed her laptop bag off the table, stuffed her charger inside, and walked straight out of the room. She walked fast down the long hallway, her high heels clicking loudly on the hard floor. She pushed open the glass door to the break room. Her young assistant, Sarah, was sitting on a small gray couch. Little Leo was sitting on her lap, holding a plastic cup of apple juice with both his small hands. He had a sticky red lollipop in his mouth. "Mama," Leo yelled happily when he saw her. He dropped the juice cup. It spilled all over Sarah's pants, but Talani did not care. She rushed over and picked her son up, holding him so tight against her chest that he let out a small squeak. She buried her face in his soft, curly hair. He smelled like baby powder and sugar. He was safe. He was hers. Nobody was going to take him away. "I am so sorry about the juice, Sarah," Talani said quickly, keeping Leo pressed against her. "I will buy you dry cleaning. I have to go. The deal is signed. Tell the senior partners." Sarah's eyes went wide. "You got him to sign? Oh my God, Talani, you are a legend." Talani did not feel like a legend. She felt like a rabbit running from a wolf. She carried Leo out of the break room and hurried toward the elevator bank. She pressed the down button over and over again, hoping the doors would open quickly. She just wanted to get out of this building and go home. The silver doors slid open with a soft ping. Talani stepped inside and turned around to press the lobby button. Before the doors could close, a large hand shot out and grabbed the metal frame. The doors bounced open again. Gideon walked into the elevator. He was alone. He had left his team of lawyers behind. He stood next to Talani, bringing the smell of rain and mint into the small space. He pressed the button to close the doors, and the elevator started to drop quickly toward the ground floor. Talani moved to the far corner of the elevator. She held Leo tighter, turning the boy's face into her neck so he would not look at the tall man. But Leo was a curious toddler. He pulled his head back and stared at Gideon with wide, dark eyes. Gideon looked down at the boy. The hard, scary look on his face completely melted away. His eyes turned soft. He stared at the shape of the boy's nose, the curve of his cheeks, and the dark, almond-shaped eyes that were exactly like his own. He was looking at his own blood. He was looking at the years he had missed. Leo blinked, then pulled his sticky red lollipop out of his mouth. He reached his little arm out toward Gideon. "Candy," he offered, trying to share. Gideon's chest moved up and down quickly. He looked like he was going to cry, but he held it in. He slowly reached out his large hand. He did not take the candy. Instead, he gently touched the back of his fingers against Leo's soft cheek. Talani slapped his hand away. The smack echoed loudly in the small elevator. "Do not touch him," she hissed. Her whole body was shaking with anger and fear. Gideon pulled his hand back slowly. He looked at the red mark starting to form on his pale skin. He did not look angry, he just looked sad. "He is beautiful," Gideon whispered, staring at the floor. "He is so beautiful, Talani." "He is mine," she said coldly. "He is ours," Gideon corrected her, looking up. "And I am going to spend the rest of my life making up for the days I missed." The elevator stopped with a sudden jerk. The doors slid open to the busy, bright lobby. Talani did not say another word. She rushed out of the elevator, pushing past the rich men in suits and the security guards. She carried Leo out the heavy glass spinning doors and onto the street. The Manhattan weather was terrible. The gray clouds were pouring heavy rain down onto the dirty sidewalks. The wind blew hard, making people's umbrellas turn inside out. Cars were honking loudly, and the street was full of yellow taxis splashing water everywhere. Talani stood under the small roof of the building, trying to block the wind from hitting Leo. She pulled out her phone with one hand, trying to order an Uber. Her fingers were shaking so badly she kept dropping the phone against her chest. A massive, shiny black SUV pulled up right to the curb. The water splashed against the tires. The back door opened, and Gideon stepped out right into the heavy rain. He did not even care that his $1,000 suit was getting completely soaked. He walked over to Talani. "Get in the car. I will take you home. It is freezing out here and the baby will get sick." "I would rather walk in the damn storm," Talani said, looking down at her phone. "Stop being stubborn," Gideon snapped, his voice rising above the sound of the thunder. "You are punishing yourself just to prove a point to me. Get in the car, Talani." "Go to hell, Gideon," she yelled back. Just then, a small, cheap gray Honda pulled up behind the black SUV. It was her Uber. Talani quickly wrapped her blazer around Leo's head to keep the rain off him. She ran through the pouring rain and pulled open the door of the dirty car. She climbed into the back seat, slamming the door shut behind her. Through the wet window, she looked back. Gideon was still standing on the sidewalk. The rain was beating down on his head, ruining his perfect hair and soaking his clothes. But he did not move. He just stood there, watching her car drive away. He looked like a man who had just found his entire world, only to watch it drive away in the rain. The dirty gray Honda smelled heavily of stale cigarettes and cheap vanilla air freshener. Talani did not care. She held Leo tight against her chest as the car moved slowly through the heavy Manhattan traffic. The rain beat against the roof of the car in a loud, steady rhythm. Leo had already fallen asleep. His soft breathing warmed her neck. She rested her chin on top of his curly head and stared out the wet window. Her heart was still beating wildly against her ribs. She had won. She had secured a $2 billion deal for her firm. She was going to be a partner. She would never have to worry about paying her rent or buying groceries ever again. But she felt completely sick to her stomach. She pulled her phone out of her pocket with a shaking hand. She had 3 missed calls from David, the senior partner at her law firm. She took a deep breath and called him back. He answered on the first ring. "Talani, tell me it is true," David yelled into the phone. He was at a loud restaurant, probably already drinking to celebrate. "Tell me you actually got the Ice King to sign for $2 billion. "I got it, David," she said softly, trying not to wake her son. "The signed contract is in my bag. His lawyers are drawing up the final papers right now." "You are a goddamn star," David shouted, laughing loudly. "I do not know how you did it. The man is a stone wall, but you broke him. As of tomorrow morning, your name goes on the wall, Talani. You are a senior partner. Enjoy your night. You earned it." The call ended. Talani dropped her phone onto the rough fabric of the car seat. She should be crying tears of joy. This was the moment she had worked for during all those sleepless nights. This was why she cleaned those dirty hotel rooms on the island, scrubbing floors until her knees bled, just to pay for her online classes. But as she looked down at the dark screen of her phone, all she could see was Gideon's face. All she could hear was his deep voice telling her he was going to take her to family court if she did not meet him tonight. He gave her the partnership, but he trapped her in a corner. An hour later, the Uber finally stopped in front of her apartment building in Brooklyn. The rain had slowed down to a light drizzle. Talani paid the driver, wrapped her jacket around the sleeping boy, and hurried inside. She took the elevator up to the 4th floor and knocked gently on her neighbor's door. Mrs. Higgins, an older Jamaican woman with a kind smile, opened the door immediately. "Oh, look at my poor baby," Mrs. Higgins whispered, reaching out to take the heavy toddler from Talani's arms. "Your assistant called me. She said you had to take him to that big fancy office. Come here, Leo. Let's get you into a warm bed." "Thank you so much, Mrs. Higgins," Talani said, rubbing her tired eyes. "I am so sorry for the trouble. My regular sitter just quit this morning." "Do not worry about it, honey. You go rest. You look like you just fought a war," the older woman said before gently closing the door. Talani walked down the hall to her own apartment. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. It was a nice place. It had clean wooden floors, a big yellow couch, and a safe room for Leo to play in. It was not a billionaire's mansion, but she paid for every single piece of furniture with her own blood, sweat, and tears. She threw her keys on the kitchen counter and walked straight into the bathroom. She turned on the cold water and splashed it on her face. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her dark eyes were red and tired. The neat bun in her hair was messy from the wind and rain. She had 1 hour before she had to meet the devil. She did not want to dress up for him. She did not want him to think she cared enough to look pretty. She took off her expensive work blazer and her pencil skirt. She pulled on a pair of dark, slightly faded jeans, a simple white t-shirt, and a heavy black leather jacket. She put on her black boots. She looked rough. She looked like a woman who was ready for a fight in a dark alley, not a woman going on a date with a CEO. That was exactly what she wanted. She pulled out her phone and sent a text message to the number Gideon's assistant had emailed her earlier. It was an address for a small, noisy, cheap diner in Hell's Kitchen. It was the kind of place that served greasy burgers and had sticky floors. It was not a place for a man who wore $1,000 suits. 30 minutes later, Talani was sitting in a red vinyl booth at the back of the diner. The place smelled heavily of fried onions and old coffee. The lights were slightly yellow, and the music playing from the old jukebox in the corner was too loud. She ordered a black coffee and stared at the front door. Exactly at 7 o'clock, the door opened. Gideon walked in. Talani felt her breath catch in her throat. He was not wearing a suit. He was wearing dark jeans, heavy boots, and a thick black sweater that hugged his wide shoulders. His dark hair was not pushed back perfectly anymore. It fell slightly over his forehead, making him look younger. He looked like the boy she met on the island 3 years ago, not the terrifying Ice King of Wall Street. He stopped just inside the door, his dark eyes scanning the crowded room. Several people turned to look at him. He just had that kind of energy. He took up all the air in the room. When his eyes finally locked onto Talani sitting in the back corner, he did not smile. He just walked straight toward her, ignoring everyone else. He slid into the booth across from her. He looked around at the dirty table, the cheap paper napkins, and the cracked salt shaker. Then he looked at her leather jacket and her bare face. He understood exactly what she was doing. "You picked this place to punish me," he said quietly. His deep voice barely cut through the loud noise of the diner. "I picked this place because the food is cheap and nobody here gives a shit who you are," Talani replied coldly. She took a sip of her bitter coffee. She kept her hands around the warm mug so he would not see them shaking. "Your hour starts right now. Talk." A tired waitress walked over, chewing loud gum. "What can I get you, handsome?" she asked, looking Gideon up and down. "Just water. Leave the pitcher," Gideon said without looking away from Talani. The waitress rolled her eyes and walked away. Gideon leaned forward, resting his large arms on the sticky table. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes that she had not noticed in the bright lights of the boardroom. 3 years ago, my father found out about you," Gideon started. He did not waste time with small talk. He had private security following me on the island. He knew I was spending every night in your cheap motel room. He knew I was falling in love with you. Talani laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Love, right. That is why you left in the middle of the night like a thief." "Let me finish," he said, his voice hard but pleading. "My father was a monster, Talani. He did not just run a company. He ran a criminal empire hiding behind clean money. He told me that if I did not pack my bags that exact night, fly back to Seoul, and marry the daughter of the Choi family to secure a merger, he would destroy you. I was a nobody cleaning toilets, Gideon. I had nothing to destroy." "You had a future," Gideon said loudly, his voice cracking. A few people in the diner turned to look, but he ignored them. He leaned closer, his eyes burning into hers. "You were studying for your law exams. You had dreams. He told me he would plant drugs in your room and have you locked in a Hawaiian prison for 10 years. He told me he would make sure you never touched a law book again. He showed me pictures of you walking to the library. He had men standing right behind you." Talani froze. The mug of coffee in her hands suddenly felt freezing cold. She remembered those late-night walks to the library. She remembered feeling like someone was watching her in the dark, but she always told herself she was just tired and crazy. "He would have done it, Talani," Gideon whispered, his voice full of pure pain. "He crushed people for fun. The only way to keep you safe was to make him believe I did not care about you. I had to leave you behind and go back to his cage. I had to pretend I was happy with that fake engagement." "So you just left," she said. Her voice was shaking now. She hated that she felt tears building up in her eyes. "You didn't wake me up. You didn't tell me. You just let me wake up to an empty bed and a note with $5,000 in it. You treated me like a goddamn prostitute." Gideon closed his eyes. A muscle in his jaw jumped wildly. The money was the only thing I could leave you to make sure you could pay your rent. I hated myself. I hated myself every single day I woke up in that house in Seoul. I drank until I passed out just so I didn't have to think about your face when you found that empty bed. He opened his eyes and looked at her. There was no pride left in him. The billionaire was gone. He was just a broken man begging for his life. The second my father died of a heart attack 2 years ago, I broke the engagement. I fought my uncle for control of the company. It took me a year of dirty, bloody fighting to get the CEO chair. And the moment I sat in it, I hired 3 private investigators to find you. But I changed my name, Talani said quietly. You changed your name, you moved cities, and you hid yourself perfectly, he agreed. When I saw you walk into that boardroom today, my heart actually stopped. I thought I was hallucinating. And then I saw him. Gideon's voice broke on the last word. He looked down at his hands. He is 2 years old, he has my eyes, he likes peppermint candy. Gideon let out a wet, shaky laugh and covered his face with his hands. I missed him being born, I missed his first steps, I missed hearing him talk. I left you alone to go through all of that pain by yourself. I am so sorry, Talani. I am so fucking sorry. Talani sat completely still. The loud diner faded away. All she could hear was the sound of his breathing. For 3 years, she had built a wall of pure hate around her heart to survive the pain of him leaving. Now, he was sitting here, ripping that wall down with the truth. He didn't leave because he didn't love her. He left to save her life. But it was not that simple. She was not a fairy tale princess who just fell back into the arms of her rich savior. She had scars. You think this fixes everything? She asked softly. Her voice was like broken glass. You think telling me a sad story makes the last 3 years disappear? I threw up in dirty trash cans at work because I was so sick from the pregnancy. I had to beg the hospital to give me a payment plan when Leo was born because I had no insurance. I did it all alone. I know, he said, dropping his hands. His eyes were completely red. I am not asking you to forgive me right now. I know you hate me, but I am asking you to let me be a father to my son. And I am asking you to let me prove that I will never run away again. Talani shook her head slowly. You are still the head of Ryu Enterprises. You are still tied to that dark legacy. Your family is still dangerous. I will not bring my son into a world where people threaten to put drugs in my bag just because they don't like me. I built a safe, clean life for us. You are danger, Gideon. You are chaos. I cannot be with you. Gideon did not look away. He did not look angry. He just reached into the pocket of his heavy sweater and pulled out his phone. He placed it flat on the sticky table between them. He tapped the screen a few times and opened a news article. He pushed the phone across the table toward her. Talani frowned and looked down at the bright screen. The headline was from a major financial news website published just 20 minutes ago. Ryu Enterprises stock plummets 15%. CEO Gideon Ryu overpays by $800 million in reckless tech acquisition. Board calls for emergency vote to remove HIM. Talani felt the air leave her lungs. She stared at the words over and over again. She looked up at Gideon in pure shock. You knew this would happen. I knew exactly what would happen, he said calmly. He leaned back against the red vinyl seat. My uncle controls 40% of the board. He has been looking for a reason to kick me out. Overpaying for your client's tech by almost $1 billion was the trigger he needed. By tomorrow morning, they will vote me out as CEO. Why the hell would you do that? She asked, her voice raising. You fought for a year to get that company. Because I do not give a fuck about the company, Talani, he said loudly. The intensity in his eyes was terrifying. I do not give a fuck about the billions, or the legacy, or the power. The only reason I took the throne was so I could have the resources to find you. And now that I have found you, I am burning the whole goddamn empire to the ground. Talani stared at him, completely paralyzed. I signed that deal today to make you a partner, he continued, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. I gave you the biggest win in your firm's history, so you would be untouchable. I bought your safety with my own crown. I am tanking my family's legacy so that my uncle and his dangerous friends have to spend the next 10 years trying to save their own money instead of looking at my life. I am destroying the danger so I can be with you. Talani felt a single tear escape her eye and roll down her cheek. She was terrified. This man was not just obsessed. He was entirely surrendered to her. He was actively destroying his own life just to build a wall of safety around hers. "You are insane," she whispered. "I am in love with you," he corrected her. He reached across the table. He did not ask for permission. He grabbed her shaking hand and held it tightly in his large, warm palm. "I am going to lose the company tomorrow. I will walk away with my personal trust fund and nothing else. I will be just a man. And I am going to spend every single day standing outside your door until you let me meet my son. I will wait in the rain. I will sleep on the street. I do not care. You own me, Talani." "You always have." Talani stared at his large hand covering hers. His skin was warm, but her whole body felt like it was freezing from the inside out. She slowly pulled her hand away and crossed her arms tightly over her chest. The diner around them was still loud. People were laughing, dropping forks, and yelling orders, but Talani could only hear the heavy beating of her own heart. This was not a romantic movie. This was real life. And in real life, men did not just burn down billion-dollar companies for a woman they had not seen in 3 years. "You are going to regret this," Talani said. Her voice was flat, trying to hide the total panic rising in her throat. "Tomorrow morning, when you wake up and realize you are no longer the king of the city, you are going to hate me. You are going to blame me for making you lose everything." Gideon did not blink. He reached out and picked up his glass of water, taking a slow sip. He set the glass back down on the sticky table. "I lost everything 3 years ago on that island," he said softly. "The company was just a loud distraction. It kept me busy so I would not blow my brains out from missing you. I do not care about the money, Talani. I have enough in my personal bank accounts to take care of you and Leo for 10 lifetimes. But the power. The dark legacy of the Ryu family, I am glad it is gone. It is a poison, and I refuse to let that poison touch my son." Talani looked away from him. She stared out the dirty window of the diner. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet and shining under the yellow streetlights. She thought about her life. She had built a safe, quiet box for herself and her baby. She knew exactly how to pay her bills, how to win her court cases, and how to survive alone. Letting Gideon back meant blowing up her safe little box. It meant dealing with his crazy family, the paparazzi, and the fear that he might break her heart again. But as she looked back at him, she saw the dark bags under his eyes. She saw the way his shoulders slumped, like he was carrying 1,000 pounds of invisible weight. He was not the dangerous ice king anymore. He was just a tired father begging to come home. "The media is going to eat you alive tomorrow," she whispered. "Let them," Gideon replied instantly. "I will not read it. I will be too busy figuring out what kind of toys a 2-year-old boy likes." Talani felt a sudden, sharp pain in her chest. It was hope. She had spent so long killing every piece of hope inside her, but now it was fighting its way back to life. She hated it, but she could not stop it. "He likes blocks," she said quietly, staring down at her cold coffee. "The big plastic ones, and he loves anything that makes a loud noise, which is a nightmare for me." Gideon's face changed. The heavy sadness completely vanished, replaced by a sudden, blinding light. A real smile broke across his face. It made him look painfully handsome. He let out a shaky breath and rubbed his hands over his face. "Blocks," he repeated, like it was the most important word in the English language. "I will buy him 1,000,000 blocks. I will build him a goddamn castle." "Do not buy him 1,000,000, Talani snapped, but there was no real anger in her voice anymore. "He has a small bedroom, and you are not going to spoil him. I did not raise a spoiled rich kid." "Okay," Gideon said quickly. He was nodding his head. "Whatever you say, you make the rules. I am just the backup." The tired waitress with the loud gum walked back over to their table. She dropped a small green piece of paper between them. "Anything else, or are you two just going to sit here looking depressed all night?" she asked. Gideon reached into the back pocket of his dark jeans. He pulled out a simple black leather wallet. He took out a crisp $100 bill and tossed it on top of the green check. "Keep the change," he told the waitress. He didn't even look at her. He kept his dark eyes locked entirely on Talani. He slid out of the red vinyl booth and stood up. He looked massive standing in the small, dirty diner. He held out his hand to Talani. "Let me take you home, please." Talani looked at his hand. It was the point of no return. If she took his hand, she was accepting his surrender. She was choosing the chaos, the danger, and the wild, impossible love that had broken her in the first place. She took a deep breath, grabbed her laptop bag, and stood up. She did not take his hand. She just walked past him toward the front door. Gideon dropped his hand, but he followed right behind her. He pushed the heavy glass door open, letting the cold New York air hit them. The sidewalk was mostly empty. The smell of wet garbage and car exhaust filled the air. Gideon stepped to the edge of the curb and raised his arm. A yellow taxi quickly pulled over, splashing dirty water against the sidewalk. Gideon opened the back door and stood back, holding it open for her. Talani climbed into the cab. It smelled like cheap pine air freshener and old leather. She slid all the way to the other side. Gideon climbed in after her, his large body taking up most of the space. He gave the driver her Brooklyn address without having to ask her for it. He already knew exactly where she lived. The cab pulled away from the curb, merging into the bright, noisy traffic of the city. They sat in silence for a long time. The streetlights flashed through the wet windows, throwing moving shadows across Gideon's face. Talani kept her back pressed against the door, holding her bag tight on her lap. She was hyper-aware of him. She could feel the heat coming off his body. She could smell the mint and rain. "When my firm finds out what happened, they are going to panic," Talani said suddenly, breaking the quiet. "When the news breaks that you tanked the company on purpose, they will think the deal is falling apart. They might take back my partnership." "They won't," Gideon said smoothly, staring straight ahead at the plastic divider behind the driver. "The contract is legally binding. The $2 billion is already moving out of the Ryu corporate accounts into escrow. My uncle cannot stop the wire transfer. He will try to sue, but by the time he gets a judge to look at it, the money will be gone. Your firm gets their massive win. You get your partnership. You are completely protected." "You really thought of everything," she muttered. Gideon turned his head to look at her. His eyes were dark and heavy in the shadows of the cab. "I had 3 years to think about it, Talani. I planned every single detail of this. I made sure that when I finally found you, no one could ever use you against me again. I cut off my own arms so they could not use them to hit you." Talani swallowed hard. The absolute devotion in his voice was terrifying. It was sick and twisted, and the most romantic thing she had ever heard in her entire life. She was a fiercely independent woman. She fought tooth and nail for her career and her baby. But sitting in this dirty cab, listening to this billionaire explain how he destroyed his own life just to make sure she was safe, she felt her walls finally start to crumble into dust. "What happens tomorrow?" she asked softly. "When you are officially out, what are you going to do?" "I am going to wake up," he said, shifting closer to her on the seat. "I am going to put on normal clothes, and I am going to come to your apartment. I am going to sit on the floor, and I am going to play with blocks, if you let me." The cab hit a deep pothole, making them both bounce on the seat. Gideon reached out instinctively, his large hand grabbing her knee to steady her. He didn't pull away when the cab smoothed out. He kept his hand there, his thumb slowly rubbing against the rough denim of her jeans. Talani looked down at his hand. She should tell him to move it. She should yell at him, but she was so tired. She was so tired of fighting the whole world by herself. She let her head fall back against the seat and closed her eyes. She did not tell him to move his hand. 40 minutes later, the cab pulled to a stop in front of her old brick apartment building in Brooklyn. Gideon paid the driver with another large bill and stepped out onto the sidewalk. He held the door for Talani. She climbed out, her boots hitting the wet concrete. The neighborhood was quiet. There were no flashing cameras, no men in dark suits, no danger. It was just a regular street with regular people sleeping in their regular beds. Gideon walked next to her as she approached the heavy front door of the building. She pulled her keys out of her pocket and unlocked the door. She stepped inside the small, brightly lit lobby. Gideon followed her. They walked to the elevator in silence. When they reached the 4th floor, the hallway was completely silent. The old carpet smelled slightly like bleach and old cooking oil. Talani walked down the hall and stopped in front of her door. The number 4B was painted in cheap gold paint. She put her key in the lock, but she did not turn it. She stood there, staring at the dark wood of the door. Behind this door was her son. Behind this door was the safe life she had built from nothing. Gideon stood right behind her. He was so close she could feel his chest brushing against her leather jacket when he breathed. He did not push her. He did not speak, he just waited. "If I open this door and let you meet him tomorrow," Talani whispered, her voice shaking badly. "You cannot change your mind. You cannot get bored in 2 months and go back to your rich friends. If you break his heart, Gideon, I swear to God, I will kill you myself." Gideon stepped closer, completely eliminating the space between them. He wrapped his large arms around her waist from behind, pulling her back flush against his hard chest. He buried his face in her neck, breathing in the scent of her skin. "I am never leaving," he swore. His voice was rough, vibrating against her skin. "I am going to marry you, Talani. I am going to put a ring on your finger, and I am going to be the father Leo deserves. I am giving you my absolute surrender. I am yours, only yours." Talani felt the last brick of her heavy wall crash to the ground. She turned the key. The lock clicked loudly in the quiet hallway. She pushed the door open. The apartment was dark, except for a small nightlight glowing in the kitchen. She stepped inside and dropped her bag on the floor. Gideon stepped in after her and gently pushed the door shut. The lock clicked again, sealing them inside together. Talani turned around to face him. He looked at her with such raw, desperate hunger that it made her breath catch. 3 years of anger, 3 years of lonely nights, and 3 years of pure heartbreak all boiled over at the exact same time. She did not say a word. She reached up, grabbed the thick collar of his black sweater, and pulled his face down to hers. Gideon groaned, a deep animal sound in the back of his throat. His arms wrapped around her like iron bands, lifting her completely off the floor. His mouth crashed down onto hers. It was a gritty, messy, desperate kiss. It tasted like rain and coffee and tears. He walked her backward until her back hit the wall of the narrow hallway. He pressed his entire body against hers, kissing her like he needed the air in her lungs to survive. Talani tangled her hands in his thick, dark hair. She kissed him back with all the anger and love she had been holding inside. She bit his bottom lip, making him hiss in pain, but he only kissed her harder, claiming her mouth over and over again. He dropped one hand to her leg, pulling it up around his hip. "Mama." A tiny, sleepy voice came from the dark living room. Talani and Gideon froze instantly. Gideon slowly lowered her feet back to the floor. They both turned their heads toward the sound, breathing heavily, their chests rising and falling in sync. Little Leo was standing in the doorway of his small bedroom. He was wearing yellow pajamas with little green dinosaurs on them. He was rubbing his eyes with his small fists, holding a worn-out blue blanket trailing on the floor behind him. Talani quickly stepped away from Gideon, smoothing down her messy hair. "I'm here, baby," she said, her voice shaking slightly. She walked over and knelt down in front of her son. "Why are you awake? Mrs. Higgins put you to bed hours ago." "Thirsty," Leo mumbled, leaning his heavy head on her shoulder. Talani picked him up, holding him tight. She stood up and turned back around. Gideon was standing perfectly still in the shadows of the hallway. He was staring at the boy in her arms. The ruthless CEO, the man who destroyed companies and fired thousands of people without feeling a thing, was completely paralyzed. He looked terrified. Leo lifted his head from Talani's shoulder. He blinked his dark eyes, adjusting to the dim light. He looked at the tall, massive man standing in their hallway. He stared for a long time. Then, a slow, sleepy smile spread across his face. "Candy Man," Leo said softly. Gideon let out a choked, wet breath. A single tear escaped his eye and rolled down his rough cheek. He slowly took a step forward, moving into the light of the kitchen. He stopped right in front of them. He reached out a trembling hand and gently touched the top of Leo's curly head. "Hi, Leo," Gideon whispered. His voice was completely broken. "I'm your dad." Talani looked at the massive man crying over his son. She knew tomorrow would be a war. The news would explode, his family would attack, and the world would go crazy. But standing in her small kitchen, watching the Ice King surrender his entire universe to a 2-year-old boy in dinosaur pajamas, she knew she had made the right choice. They were going to fight the world together, and they were going to win. The dark night slowly turned into a bright, cold morning. The sun came up over the brick buildings of Brooklyn, shining through the small living room window. Talani stood in the kitchen doorway, holding a warm mug of black coffee. She had not slept a single minute. She had spent the whole night just watching them. Gideon was sitting cross-legged on the cheap, colorful rug in the middle of the floor. He was still wearing his dark jeans and his heavy black sweater. He looked way too big for the small room. Little Leo was sitting right in front of him, wearing his dinosaur pajamas. Between them was a huge pile of big, plastic building blocks. "Put the red one here," Gideon whispered softly. He pointed a long, pale finger to the top of a crooked plastic tower. Leo grabbed a blue block instead. He smashed it onto the top of the tower. The whole thing fell over with a loud crash. Leo laughed, a bright, happy sound that filled the quiet apartment. Gideon did not get mad, he just smiled. It was a real, wide smile that made his dark eyes crinkle at the corners. "Okay," Gideon said, picking up the pieces with his large hands. "We will build a blue castle this time. You are the boss, little man." Talani felt a tight squeeze in her chest. She took a slow sip of her bitter coffee. The man sitting on her floor was the same man who destroyed companies and terrified grown men. But right now, he was just a father trying to figure out how to play. He looked tired, but he looked completely at peace. He had not looked at his phone once. He had not checked his email. He had completely disconnected from the billionaire world just to build a plastic castle. Suddenly, Talani's phone started vibrating on the kitchen counter. It made a loud, buzzing noise against the hard wood. She walked over and looked at the bright screen. It was David, the senior partner at her law firm. It was only 6 in the morning. He never called this early unless someone was dead or the firm was losing a massive amount of money. Talani felt a sudden drop in her stomach. The peaceful morning was over. She took a deep breath, swiped the screen, and put the phone to her ear. "Hello, David, it is early." "Turn on your goddamn television right now," David screamed into the phone. His voice was so loud and angry that Talani actually had to pull the phone away from her ear for a second. "David, calm down. What is going on?" she asked, keeping her voice low so she would not scare Leo in the next room. "Calm down, you want me to calm down?" David yelled, breathing heavily into the microphone. "You stupid girl, I trusted you. I was going to put your name on the wall today. I thought you were a shark, but you are just a cheap, dirty liar. Turn on the news, Talani. Channel 4. Do it right fucking now." Talani's hands started to shake. She put the coffee mug down on the counter before she dropped it. She grabbed the small black remote next to the sink and pointed it at the little television sitting on the kitchen counter. She pressed the power button and flipped to Channel 4. The morning news was on, but they were not talking about the weather. A picture of Talani's face was taking up the entire screen. It was a picture from her law school graduation. Right next to her picture was a picture of Gideon in his expensive suit, looking cold and dangerous. The big red words at the bottom of the screen read, "Billionaire blackmailed. Ryu Enterprises CEO TRICKED into $2 billion deal BY secret mistress." Talani felt the air completely leave her lungs. She stared at the screen. Her vision started to get blurry. "The board of Ryu Enterprises held an emergency meeting at midnight last night," the blonde news anchor said, staring seriously into the camera. Sources close to the Ryu family, including the CEO's uncle, claim that Gideon Ryu was manipulated into signing the massive $2 billion tech buyout. Documents leaked to the press show that the lead lawyer for the opposing team, Talani Davis, has a secret, hidden child with Mr. Ryu. The family claims she used this child to blackmail the CEO into overpaying for the company by nearly $1 billion to secure a massive payday for her own law firm. "Did you hear that?" David screamed through the phone. "They are saying you blackmailed him. They are saying you used a bastard kid to steal $1 billion from their company." "David, that is a lie," Talani yelled back. She did not care about keeping her voice down anymore. "I did not blackmail him. I negotiated a fair deal for our client. My personal life has nothing to do with this." "Your personal life is on national television?" David roared. "His uncle's lawyers just served our firm with a massive lawsuit. They are freezing the $2 billion transfer. They are reporting you to the state ethics board. They are saying you slept your way to the top and used your kid as a weapon. You are done, Talani. You are completely finished. I am putting you on unpaid leave immediately. If you try to come into the office, I will have security throw you out on the street." "David, please, you know how hard I work. You know I am a good lawyer," she begged, tears hot and angry in her eyes. "Do not let them do this to me. I built my reputation from the ground up." "Your reputation is garbage," David said coldly. "You are just another gold digger who tried to play in the big leagues and got caught. Do not ever call this number again." The line went dead. Talani stood in the kitchen, listening to the quiet beep of the disconnected call. Her hand dropped to her side. She looked at the television screen. They were showing a video of her getting into the dirty cab with Gideon last night outside the diner. Someone had followed them. Someone had been taking pictures in the dark. Everything she had built was gone. The late nights studying, the sick mornings cleaning hotel rooms, the perfect, clean reputation she had fought so hard to create. Gideon's uncle had taken it all away in one single morning just to save his own money. A loud crash came from the living room. Talani jumped and turned around. Gideon was standing up. He had knocked over the plastic blocks. His hands were curled into tight fists at his sides. He was staring at the small television screen in the kitchen. He had heard every single word. The soft, gentle father was completely gone. The terrifying Ice King was back. His face was twisted in pure, ugly rage. His chest was moving up and down fast. He looked like a man who was ready to murder someone with his bare hands. "I am going to kill him," Gideon said. His voice was a low, shaking growl that vibrated in the small apartment. "I am going to rip his fucking throat out." Leo started to cry. The loud noise and the sudden scary energy in the room terrified the little boy. Talani snapped out of her shock. She rushed into the living room and scooped Leo up from the floor. She held him tight, rubbing his back to calm him down. "SHH, baby, it is okay. Mama is here, it is okay." Gideon did not look at Leo. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He started typing furiously. "I am calling my private security team. I am sending a car to pick you both up. You are going to a safe house in upstate New York. I am going to the Ryu building, and I am going to destroy my uncle. I will tie him up in so many lawsuits he will never see the sun again." "No," Talani said loudly. Gideon stopped typing and looked at her. His eyes were wild. "Talani, you do not understand what is happening. The press is going to find this address. There will be 50 cameras outside your door in 10 minutes. They will attack you when you try to leave. You have to hide." "I am not hiding," Talani yelled. She held Leo tighter. "I hid for 3 years, Gideon. I hid from your father, I hid from your family, and I hid from the world. I am done hiding. If I run away to a safe house, it makes me look exactly like the dirty mistress they are saying I am." "They ruined your career," Gideon yelled back, taking a step toward her. "They called my son a weapon. I am not going to let them disrespect you like this. I told you I would protect you. Let me protect you." "By locking me in a cage?" she asked, her voice shaking with angry tears. "You think putting me in a secret house fixes this? I am a lawyer. I am a professional. I fought for my pristine reputation, and I am not going to let some greedy old man in a suit take it away from me. I am going to fight back." Gideon stared at her. He saw the fierce fire burning in her dark eyes. He saw the proud, strong woman who had clawed her way out of poverty. He slowly lowered his phone. "What do you want to do?" he asked quietly. "I want you to call a press conference," Talani said, her voice turning completely cold and steady. "Right now, at the Ryu Enterprises main lobby. Invite every single news station in the city. Tell your uncle to be there." Gideon frowned, confused. "Talani, if you go in front of those cameras, they will tear you to pieces. They will ask you terrible questions." "Let them ask," she said, lifting her chin. "I am not going to be your secret anymore, Gideon. If you really meant what you said last night, if you really want to burn down your empire to prove your loyalty to me, then we are going to do it together. In the light. In front of the whole goddamn world." Gideon's breath caught in his throat. He looked at her like she was a god. He had been fully prepared to lose everything, to walk away in the dark and just live a quiet life with her. But she was not asking him to walk away. She was asking him to stand beside her and fight the monsters face to face. She was risking the last piece of her good name just to stand with him. "You are completely sure about this?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Once we walk out that door together, there is no going back. My family will come after us with everything they have." "I survived your family once," Talani said. She wiped a single tear from her cheek. "I will survive them again, but this time I am not doing it alone." Gideon walked over to her. He did not care about the anger or the danger anymore. He reached out and gently wrapped his arms around both Talani and the crying toddler in her arms. He kissed the side of her head, right on her dark hair. "I am yours," Gideon whispered against her skin. Point me at the target, and I will destroy it for you. Call the press, Talani ordered. And take a shower. You smell like cheap diner food. If we are going to war, you need to wear a suit. 1 hour later, Talani stood in front of her bathroom mirror. She had put her thick hair into a perfect, tight bun. She was wearing her most expensive, sharpest black power suit. She put on dark red lipstick. She looked like a woman who was ready to ruin someone's life. She looked like a shark. Gideon stood in the hallway waiting for her. He had called his assistant and had a fresh, dark blue $1,000 suit delivered to the apartment. His hair was slicked back perfectly. The dark bags under his eyes were still there, but his posture was completely straight. The Ice King was fully armed and ready for battle. Mrs. Higgins, the sweet neighbor, was sitting on the yellow couch in the living room. She was feeding Leo a bowl of oatmeal. "Do not worry about my baby," Mrs. Higgins said, waving her spoon at Talani. "We are going to stay right here and watch cartoons all day. You go handle your business, honey." "Thank you, Mrs. Higgins. Keep the door locked," Talani said. She walked over and kissed Leo hard on his sticky cheek. "Be good for her, baby. Mama will be back soon." "Bye-bye," Leo mumbled around a mouthful of oatmeal. Talani walked to the front door and opened it. Gideon stepped out into the hallway right behind her. When they walked out the heavy front doors of the brick apartment building, the street was pure chaos. Gideon had been right. There were at least 40 reporters standing on the wet sidewalk. Camera flashes exploded like lightning. People were screaming questions, shoving large microphones toward them. "Talani, is it true you blackmailed the CEO? Mr. Ryu, did you steal company money to pay off your mistress? Are you facing disbarment, Miss Davis?" Gideon instantly stepped in front of Talani. He used his massive body as a shield. He grabbed her hand, linking his long fingers tightly through hers. He did not push the reporters. He just glared at them with eyes so cold and dead that the crowd instinctively took a step back. A sleek black town car was waiting at the curb. Gideon opened the back door, helped Talani inside, and climbed in after her. He slammed the door shut, cutting off the screaming voices of the reporters. "To the Ryu Tower," Gideon told the driver. "Fast." The car sped away from the curb. Talani looked down at their joined hands. Gideon was holding on so tight his knuckles were white. She squeezed his hand back. "My uncle called a full board meeting for 8 o'clock this morning," Gideon said, staring out the tinted window at the passing city. "He is going to use this scandal to force a vote. He wants to strip me of my CEO title and cancel your $2 billion deal to save the money." "Let him try," Talani said smoothly. She opened her black leather laptop bag on her lap. She pulled out a thick stack of printed papers. It was the contract they had signed yesterday. "He thinks I am just a scared girl he can bully. He forgot that I am the lawyer who just beat his entire legal team in a closed room. I read your family's corporate bylaws last night, Gideon. Every single page." Gideon looked at her, truly surprised. "You read the bylaws? Why?" "Because I knew he would try to squirm out of the deal," she said, flipping to the back page of the contract. "Your uncle only controls 40% of the voting shares. You control 30%. The rest is owned by independent shareholders. To cancel a signed, legally binding acquisition deal, he needs a 75% supermajority vote. He doesn't have the numbers to kill the deal legally. Not today." "He doesn't need to kill the deal legally," Gideon explained, his voice dark. "He just needs to destroy my reputation with this scandal so the independent shareholders get scared and vote me out. Once I am out, he becomes acting CEO, and he can tie the money up in court for years until your client goes bankrupt." "He is not going to get the chance," Talani said. She closed her bag. "Because we are going to give the press a better story than a dirty scandal." "What story?" Talani turned her head and looked right into his dark eyes. "A love story. A story about a man who loves his family so much he is willing to publicly step down from his own throne." The black town car drove fast through the busy streets of Manhattan. It pulled up to the front of the massive Ryu Enterprises building. The glass tower reached so high into the sky that the top was hidden in the gray morning clouds. Out front, it was a total circus. There were at least 10 white news vans parked illegally on the curb. Reporters with huge cameras and bright lights were standing everywhere, waiting for blood. Gideon did not wait for his driver to open the door. He kicked his door open and stepped out onto the concrete. The second his expensive blue suit hit the light, the crowd went completely crazy. The camera flashes were so bright it looked like lightning striking over and over again. People were screaming his name, trying to push past the thick line of private security guards standing in front of the building. Gideon ignored all of them. He turned around and held his hand out. Talani took it. She stepped out of the car, her black heels clicking loudly on the ground. She stood up tall, adjusting her sharp black blazer. The crowd screamed even louder when they saw her. They called her horrible names. They called her a gold digger, a blackmailer, and a dirty secret. Talani felt her heart beating wildly in her chest, but she did not let it show on her face. She kept her chin up and her eyes completely dead. Gideon pulled her close to his side. He wrapped his thick arm around her waist, holding her so tight she could feel the heat of his body through her clothes. They walked forward together. They did not run. They walked slow, like royalty walking through a crowd of peasants. They pushed through the heavy glass doors of the lobby. The noise from the street was suddenly cut off. The massive lobby was full of employees in gray suits. Everyone stopped walking. Everyone stopped talking. Hundreds of eyes stared at them as they walked across the shiny marble floor toward the private elevators. If you are loving this epic walk of power, please leave a like on this video right now. It tells the algorithm to push more amazing stories just like this to your feed. Also, let me know in the comments, what would you rate Talani's bravery on a scale of 1 to 10? But listen, if you do not hit that subscribe button for Afro-Korean Love FM right now, the greedy board members might actually win. They might vote Gideon out and leave Talani to face the angry media all by herself. Do not let her lose everything. Subscribe now and help her win the war. The gold doors of the private elevator slid open. Gideon and Talani stepped inside. Gideon pressed the button for the top floor. The doors closed, locking them in the quiet box. Gideon looked down at her. His dark eyes were burning with pride. "Are you shaking?" he asked softly, running his thumb over her knuckles. "A little bit," Talani admitted, taking a deep breath. "But I am not scared. I am just really angry." "Good," Gideon said. A dark, dangerous smile spread across his face. "Use it. When we walk into that room, they are going to try to eat you alive. Do not let them breathe." The elevator stopped. The doors opened to the penthouse level. There was a long hallway with a thick red carpet leading to the double wooden doors of the main boardroom. Two large security guards in black suits were standing in front of the doors. When they saw Gideon, they immediately stepped to the side and lowered their heads. Gideon did not even knock. He reached out and pushed both doors open with a loud crash. The boardroom was massive. A long, shiny black table sat in the middle of the room. 12 older men and 2 women were sitting around it. At the head of the table sat Gideon's uncle, Tae-sung. He was an older Korean man with silver hair, a sharp nose, and cold eyes. He was right in the middle of giving a speech. "And because of this reckless, illegal behavior, I move for an immediate vote to strip Gideon Ryu of his title," Tae-sung was saying. He stopped talking the second the doors crashed open. Everyone in the room turned their heads. Some of the board members gasped. Gideon walked into the room, keeping Talani tightly by his side. "You cannot vote me out while I am standing in the room, uncle," Gideon said. His voice was completely flat and deadly. "I am still the CEO of this company, and you are sitting in my chair." Tae-sung's face turned red with anger. He stood up slowly. "You have a lot of nerve coming here today, Gideon, and you have even more nerve bringing this woman into our building. Have you not embarrassed this family enough?" "Watch your mouth," Gideon barked, taking a heavy step forward. The whole room felt the air drop 10 degrees. "If you disrespect her, I will throw you out of that window myself." Tae-sung laughed, a dry, evil sound. He looked around the table at the other board members. "Do you see this? He is completely crazy. He has lost his mind over a cheap girl. Miss Davis, I highly suggest you leave this room before I call the police and have you arrested for corporate blackmail." Talani gently pulled her hand out of Gideon's grip. She walked past him, stepping right up to the long black table. She threw her heavy leather laptop bag onto the shiny wood. It made a loud smack that made a few people jump. "Call them," Talani said. Her voice was crystal clear and completely steady. "Call the police right now. Tell them you want to arrest the senior partner of the law firm that just signed a legally binding $2 billion contract with your company. Let us see how fast the judge laughs in your face." Tae-sung narrowed his eyes. You tricked him. You used your bastard child to hold a gun to his head and force him to overpay. My child is the only heir to the Ryu family line, Talani said loudly, pointing a finger right at his face. So you better be very careful how you speak about him. And as for the deal, nobody held a gun to anyone's head. The tech company you just bought is worth every single penny. Your stock only dropped this morning because you leaked a dirty lie to the press to cause a panic. It does not matter what the tech is worth, an older white man at the table said nervously. The public thinks it is a dirty payoff. The media is destroying us. Our investors are pulling out. That is exactly why we are here, Talani said, turning to look at the terrified man. She opened her bag and pulled out her laptop. She flipped the screen open and pressed a few buttons. She turned the laptop around so the whole board could see the screen. It was a live feed of the morning news, but it was not Channel 4. It was a completely different, much bigger news network. On the screen, a female news anchor was speaking excitedly. In a shocking twist, sources close to the Ryu family have revealed the real truth behind the massive tech buyout. It is not blackmail. It is a modern-day fairy tale. Gideon Ryu, the notoriously cold CEO, discovered that the lawyer negotiating against him was actually his lost love, a woman he was forced to leave years ago by his abusive, controlling father. Upon discovering he had a 2-year-old son, Mr. Ryu decided to prove his ultimate loyalty. He bought her client's company for $2 billion, saving 2,000 American jobs in the process, and openly defied his corrupt uncle to build a new, clean legacy for his new family. The boardroom went completely dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Tae-sung stared at the screen, his mouth slightly open. What is this? He whispered. That is my PR team, Talani said smoothly. She leaned her hands on the table, looking at the board members. While you were busy leaking dirty rumors to cheap gossip channels at midnight, I was on the phone with the biggest public relations firm in New York. I gave them an exclusive story. I gave them the truth. She tapped the keyboard. The screen changed to a live graph of the Ryu Enterprises stock price. The red line that had been crashing down all morning was suddenly stopping. It slowly ticked upward, turning green. The public loves a bad boy who turns good for his family, Talani explained, pacing slowly in front of the table. They love a billionaire who sacrifices money for love, and more importantly, retail investors love a CEO who is willing to bet big to save American tech jobs. Your stock is not crashing anymore. It is bouncing back. By noon, it will be higher than it was yesterday. The board members started looking at each other, whispering quickly. The anger in the room was disappearing, replaced by greedy excitement. Tae-sung hit the table with his fist. This is a trick. You cannot just spin a massive financial loss into a stupid romance story. I just did, Talani replied coldly. I control the narrative now. And right now, the narrative is that Gideon Ryu is a hero, and you, Tae-sung, are the jealous, bitter old uncle who tried to tear a young family apart for your own greed. If you try to hold a vote to fire him today, the press will destroy you. The public will demand your head on a stick. You will be voted off this board by the end of the week. Tae-sung looked like he could not breathe. He looked at the faces of his board members, waiting for someone to defend him. But nobody spoke. They were businessmen. They only cared about the green line on the graph. If the green line was going up, they did not care who was sitting in the CEO chair. Gideon walked up slowly and stood right behind Talani. He did not say a word. He just stood there, looking at his uncle like a lion looking at a dying mouse. So here is what is going to happen, Talani said, taking total control of the room. The $2 billion wire transfer goes through today. My firm gets its money. The tech company keeps its workers. Gideon stays the CEO of Ryu Enterprises. And you, Tae-sung, are going to pack your office and take an early retirement. I will not, Tae-sung hissed, his face purple. You cannot force me out. I own 20% of this company. You can keep your shares, Gideon finally spoke. His deep voice echoed off the walls. But if I ever see your face in this building again, I will release the private files I found in my father's safe. The ones detailing exactly how much money you stole from the employee pension fund 5 years ago. Tae-sung froze entirely. The fight completely drained out of his body. He looked old, tired, and beat. He slowly lowered his eyes to the shiny black table. Meeting adjourned, Gideon said loudly. Nobody argued. The board members quickly stood up, grabbing their papers and briefcases. They rushed out of the room, practically running to get away from the terrifying couple standing at the front. Within 2 minutes, the massive boardroom was empty except for Gideon, Talani, and the broken uncle sitting at the head of the table. Taesung slowly stood up. He did not look at them. He walked past them in total silence, his shoulders slumped. The heavy wooden doors clicked shut behind him. Talani stood at the table for a long second. She stared at the green line on her laptop screen. It was still going up. The plan had worked. She had actually beaten the billionaires at their own dirty game. Suddenly, her knees went completely weak. The pure adrenaline that had been keeping her standing just vanished. She swayed on her feet, grabbing the edge of the table to stop herself from falling. Gideon caught her instantly. His large hands grabbed her waist, pulling her back against his solid chest. He turned her around and picked her up, sitting her on the edge of the heavy boardroom table. He stood between her legs, wrapping his arms around her tightly. "You did it," Gideon whispered, burying his face in her neck. He was breathing hard. "You completely destroyed him. You saved my life." Talani let out a shaky breath, wrapping her arms around his wide shoulders. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the strong, fast beat of his heart. "I saved my own life," she corrected him softly. "I told you, I am not a victim anymore. If someone comes for my family, I bite back." Gideon pulled his head back to look at her. His dark eyes were full of absolute worship. He had loved her when she was a sweet, struggling girl on the island. But right now, looking at the fierce, ruthless woman who had just conquered a boardroom of monsters, he was completely possessed by her. "Marry me," he said. It was not a question. It was a desperate demand. "Marry me right now, today. Let me give you my name. Let me give Leo my name. I want the whole world to know you belong to me." Talani looked at his handsome face. She thought about the last 3 years of pain, the lonely nights, and the terrible fear. But she also thought about the man sitting on her cheap rug this morning, building a plastic castle for a little boy. She thought about the man who was ready to burn down his entire empire just to make sure she was safe. She reached up and grabbed the lapels of his expensive blue suit. She pulled him close, her dark eyes locking onto his. "I am not signing a prenuptial agreement," she said, her voice completely serious. Gideon threw his head back and laughed. It was a loud, rich, joyful sound that filled the empty boardroom. It was the sound of a man who was finally free. He looked back down at her, a huge smile on his face. "Take it all," Gideon said, leaning in until his lips were brushing against hers. "Take my money, take my company, take my soul. It is all yours anyway." He kissed her, hard and deep. Talani kissed him back, letting go of the last tiny piece of fear in her heart. The war was over. The Ice King had surrendered, and the poor cleaner had won the entire kingdom.